Hi, my name is Ryan. Today I'd like to talk about a very interesting board game from 2017 called Dream On that carries on the ludic aesthetic of games like Dixit and Concept, but it differs from these games in creating a framework where players are temporarily untethered from ludic consequence. It creates a space where players are free to engage in a kind of chaotic and carefree play. It achieves this through the structure of its objectives, the time constraints imposed, and the two phases of play. Now, Dream On does balance this chaotic style of play, however, by forcing players to experience the consequences of their actions in the second phase of the game, a kind of ordered counterweight. First, I'll talk about how Dream On is played. It exists within a social sphere of play in contrast to games where the focus is more on the system, like Carcassonne and Mansions of Madness. I'll then explain exactly what is meant by the chaotic and ordered styles of play and how Dream On is balanced on a precipice between both. Finally, I'll look at how this compares to other board games which take place on a social sphere of play. Dream On is a cooperative game for 2 to 8 players, and the game is divided into 2 phases, dreaming and remembering. In the first phase, the group has 2 minutes to build the story of a collective dream by laying down cards face up into one pile in the centre, adding a few words to describe their card. Players have a hand of 3 cards at all times from which they can add to the dream pile, but there is no player order, so anyone can add to the dream at any time, possibly adding multiple cards in a row. In the second phase of the game, the dream pile built by the players is turned face down and it is passed around clockwise, with each player trying to remember what card came next in the dream. Points are scored depending on whether the active player was able to remember the card on their own, whether they needed help to remember it, or whether they guessed incorrectly. After the remembering phase has finished, the score is added up and the players find out how well they have remembered their dream. So let's talk a little bit about play between order and chaos. In 1958, Roger Cowler wrote a book called Man, Play and Games. In this, he writes about different types of play between mimicry, contest, chance and vertigo. But he also identifies that each form of play operates on a balance between what he calls ludus and paideia. Paideia is a free and chaotic form of play, where improvisation rules and impulsive exuberance is dominant. Ludus is the inverse, a form of play which is ordered and rule-bound, where certain experiences are tightly controlled by expected behaviours. Now, play exists on a spectrum between these two polar opposites. It's never completely chaotic or completely ordered. But we can see a kind of chaotic behaviour in how kids' imaginations jump across a variety of different fantasies. They're spies one minute and shopkeepers the next. Play moves down the spectrum towards ludus when rules start to form. That ball we're all kicking must go through those goalposts, requiring a bit more skill and accuracy from the players. Understanding play on a spectrum between an order-making activity and as a chaotic expression of self can help us understand the excitement that Dream On brings to board games that operate in the social sphere. Dream On temporarily untethers the player from any ludic consequence, and by that I mean that it constructs a frame in which the experience of moment-to-moment chaotic play is far more interesting than pursuing the objective. This is achieved in a few ways. The game is cooperative, and so players do not need to take their personal progress towards the objective into account. The game is split into 2 phases. The dreaming phase is set apart entirely from any immediate consequences, and so play in this phase is free from wider ludic concerns. The first phase has a 2-minute timer. This time constraint focuses players more towards creating a story than considering the consequences of how they have constructed it. Dream On provides a structure for true chaotic play, but because of the second phase of the game where the consequences are felt, it also provides a choice for players to strategize as an ordered group before the game starts. Chaotic play is best exemplified with an eye on the second phase of the game where players try to remember the dream in chronological sequence. Let's take a look at the following dream and how difficult it might be to remember. Once upon a time on the beach there lived a bunch of monsters who loved to eat chocolate and oranges and bananas, but not fried eggs. Anyway, they all died, and no one knows why. So says this fortune teller with a lot of baggage. Oh my god, a bunny rabbit in a cowboy hat! It's also important to remember that upwards of 30 cards could have been played, making the process of remembering the entire dream in sequence quite difficult. In this dream, we encounter lists, positive and negative statements, and non sequiturs. Remembering all of these cards in order proves difficult because there's no logical sequence of events, and the story jumps from character to character with no chain of causation to follow. However, in the moment of playing these cards with the time pressure imposed and a limit of 3 cards in each player's hand, it can be tempting to throw down any card no matter how tenuous its link, because it is a joy to do so. At times, the more outlandish the better for the overall play experience. This chaotic form of play in Dream On is natural to fall back on, since collaborating with a group of players to maximise the amount of points is a difficult endeavour. The players would need to construct a story that follows a logical sequence that doesn't depend on lists that can be easily mixed up. It would also help if the story focused on one character. For example, Superbolt was a beloved hero who was faster than an airplane, but he wore glasses to conceal his identity. Superbolt had a child and wished for them to follow in their footsteps. But one day the Earth was invaded by dinosaurs, who had psychic powers. Superbolt had an idea for how to defeat the dinosaurs and save the Earth, but they needed to study a lot first. So why is it important to recognise that this game allows for a free choice in play between order and chaos? Because in most board games there is a rigid structure in place for how to win either competitively or cooperatively. This rigid structure does not lend itself to a chaotic, carefree style of play. To win, players must strategize and organize their pieces on the board. Games that take place within a social sphere, however, do touch upon an element of chaos in the vast possibilities of human interaction. No two games of Resistance or Secret Hitler are the same because of the social deduction mechanics, and bluffing your way through a secret bid in Revolution or Five Tribes changes entirely when you play with somebody different. In these examples, there exists almost limitless possibilities for people to play through the social elements of a game. And within these social elements, Dream On structures the option of pure chaotic play. In Dixit, because it's a competitive structure and the point allocation forces a balance between ambiguity and ease of interpretation, a fully chaotic approach can hinder the individual player. Similarly, adopting a chaotic style of play, where anything goes in concept, can be a frustrating experience, since the game is all about the communication of ideas and objects. Dream On allows and encourages us to take part in carefree play, where a group of players can have a fun and chaotic time, creating an outlandish story together. Thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to watch my last video on Laser League and Bullet Hells, then click on the link in the video. If you'd like to be notified when my next video releases, then click on the subscribe button.